Joining us is John Hanna. And John Hanna served with Vice President Cheney's National Security Advisor during the second term of President Bush. And he was also a senior advisor to Secretary of State Warren Christopher during the Clinton administration. John Hanna, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Arlene. It's a pleasure to be with you.
All right. This is being hailed and it is being marketed, if I can use that word politically, as the beginning of a new golden time between the U.S. and Iran. However, there are some analysis today who say, it's a little bit confusing considering that Iran has not appealed to be really, supportive of the United States during these times.
Yeah, I do think it's hard to be overly optimistic about what's happened, Arlene. At best, I think you can say with the nuclear deal, we may have bought ourselves somewhere between 8 and 15 years of time before Iran is once again allowed to build up its nuclear infrastructure to industrial-sized strength and is able to once again move to the verge of being a nuclear power. I mean, if you only think about what's happened since the deal was signed in July and you watch what Iran's behavior has been, it's been anything but a friend of the United States or a friend of the West. Together with the Russians, they've engaged in a massive military intervention into Syria. They've tested against UN resolutions those ballistic missiles. They've actually seized another American citizen as a prisoner. They fired missiles within striking distance of the American fleet in the Gulf. They've burned down a Saudi embassy, and of course they seized 10 of our sailors just last week and subjected them to a humiliating form of surrender and apology that contravenes international law. So I don't think we ought to get ahead of ourselves here. I think we're going to need to continue to be very, very vigilant when it comes to Iran.
There are various, fighting aspects of this on how it is interpreted. There was more information today about the sailors being held at gunpoint. Which side is winning, do you think, John Hanna?
Well, I think, people are prone to want to believe the best. They've got a president and a good part of the rest of the Western world telling them that this is a great day for diplomacy and that the world is moving forward and peace might be breaking out. And I think people would like to believe that. Lord knows we need some good news in a very dismal landscape. But my own sense of this is a lot more sober, I'm afraid. I think the Iranians are telling us every day and every week that they still view the United States as the great Satan, as a power that they believe dominates the international system unjustly, and that the sole and single purpose of their foreign policy is to overturn that international order that United States power has underwritten for the better part of the last 70 years. And I think they see an America in decline. They do now see an opportunity, if they play their cards right over the next decade or so, to become the dominant power in the Persian Gulf and to push America out. If that's what America is doing anyway, why don't they give us a hand? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just reacting to that. Often when you're on the show, you will talk about whatever is happening in that deal having an effect in the Middle East. What are the other countries like Saudi Arabia thinking after all this has finally come to fruition?
Yeah, well, I think the Saudis and a lot of our other Gulf partners, as well as the Israelis, are simply looking on in horror. Again, they've seen this litany of challenges to American power even since the deal was signed without really any American response. I don't think the President of the United States has yet to speak to this abject humiliation of our soldiers and country in the Gulf last week, the seizure of these sailors. So I think the Saudis and others are clearly now going their own way. If they need to, they will execute a Shiite cleric against American wishes. They will launch a war into Yemen. They will allow al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula to gain strength and power. And at some point, as they look 10 or 15 years down the road, when Iran is going to be allowed without constraint to build as many centrifuges as it wants and to enrich as much uranium as they want, well, they're going to do their whatever they need to do to make sure that they've got some kind of nuclear deterrent of their own, whether that means going out and getting it from the Pakistanis. The Saudi defense minister, no surprise, was in Pakistan just last week talking to their military, or they're going to put in place their own nuclear program. And, of course, they're buying nuclear reactors from the Russians as we speak. So this is going to be a very, very dangerous world, I'm afraid.
What about the motivation in this as we watch it? I mean, we talked about it and touched on it before. Is this a legacy nuclear deal with Iran for this president?
Oh, I think there's no question that the president sees this as his preeminent accomplishment in foreign affairs, that he really does see this as he, after presidents for 35, 36 years, have been unable to come to terms with the Islamic Republic, that he has done it, that he is transforming the nature of American foreign policy, either with Iran, with Cuba, with other old adversaries. And that this is a lasting accomplishment that I think he believes will somehow make the world safer for American power, whereas somebody like myself believes that in fact this signifies the receding of American power from the world, creating a vacuum. We're hoping the Iranians can fill that and somehow stabilize the Middle East in our place, but I'm afraid that vacuum is only going to be filled by the forces of chaos and conflict, and I do fear eventually war.
Wow. Is this a Pandora's box? Election year in the United States, if there is a new president with different views on Iran, can anything about this be changed, or is most of it done?
Well, I think there will be a great deal of inertia with this deal. If the Iranians are smart, as I think they will be with respect to the technical aspects of this nuclear deal, I think they'll probably abide by it because they get so much in exchange for it, both on the economic side as well as a patient pathway to eventually building their own nuclear weapons. So I think for a new president coming in, even if he's determined to amend this deal and change it, there would be an extraordinary amount of diplomacy to have to do with the Europeans and the rest of the international community if we have any hope of doing that, barring some kind of egregious Iranian violation of the deal. It's going to be a very upward climb for a new American president who understands the dangers of this deal to really begin doing something about it. An awful lot of diplomacy between here and there.
There are some analysts who said there's a great potential for embarrassment here, depending on how Iran acts. You've talked about how, they sense an American weakness here. What is there to watch for in the future after this has been complete?
I think it will be primarily, not so much on the nuclear front in terms of a major violation or push toward developing nuclear weapons on the part of Iran in the short term. They want to make sure they get all of the economic benefits out of this first and begin to really strengthen and build up their own economy and conventional military strength first before they test us again. But I think it will be in the other areas, in the regional ambitions of Iran to kind of sow discord, instability, violence, and terror throughout a good chunk of the Middle East. First and foremost, they're going to win this war in Syria, they believe. They believe that that Assad and between Assad, the Russians, Hezbollah, and Iran, they are going to reassert the Syrian regime's dominance over that country, and therefore obviously inflict some kind of defeat on America and its allies who have been pushing against the Assad regime. And then I think they'll turn to other theaters of war to undermine the Saudis in Yemen, undermine the Bahrainis and the Saudis internally through their own discontented Shiite populations there, and perhaps eventually turn their attention again to that border in Lebanon where Hezbollah has over 100,000 missiles and begin causing trouble with Israel again.
Wow. All right. John Hannah, it's always wonderful to have you to help us analyze these things. We appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much, Arlene.